Okay, Leila, would you like to kick us off?
Yep. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar about developing a successful community renewable energy project. My name is Leila Tavendale, and I'm a principal engineer at Locogen, where I oversee all of the community projects that we undertake. I'm joined today by my two lovely co-hosts, Chris Morris of Local Energy Scotland and Simon Peltenberg of Ripple Energy. We're here today because at the back end of last year, I saw a programme on Channel 4 that said in 2022, only 2 wind turbines were installed in England. It's a slightly misleading figure, what with the knock-on effects of COVID and lockdown causing drastic delays in grid connections, planning decisions and supply chains. However, we see countless community groups coming to us with dreams of developing a renewable energy project, and so few of them ever actually come through to fruition. I reached out to people in the industry who have the knowledge and experience to help me show you how we can provide support to turn your dreams into a reality. And from there, this webinar was born. Before I hand over to Chris, I just wanted to give a quick introduction to Locogen, who we are and what we do type thing. We are an engineering consultancy. We support our clients to design, develop, build and operate renewable energy projects. We work across the whole life cycle of a project, from feasibility, including grid and planning or consenting works, through implementation and construction management, and asset management at the end of operational projects. We co-invest with our clients in projects, putting our money where our mouth is. We specialise in solar, onshore wind, energy storage, green hydrogen technologies and low carbon heat, and we work across multiple client sectors. But today we'll be focusing on how we help community groups. Here's just a selection of the community groups that we've worked with or continue to work with ongoing projects. Please add any questions that you have into the questions box on your dashboard and we'll address them at the end. I'll now pass over to Chris, who will explain how Local Energy Scotland can support communities to investigate sustainable solutions.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Leila. So, good morning, all. It is great to be here, and thanks, Leila. And it's really positive that Locogen have organised this event focusing on community energy, because community energy is all about local people coming together, using local resources to develop projects that benefit the environment and the place they live. I'm going to try and focus, like Leila says, on those initial steps around investigating new projects and what support's available to you. It is quite Scottish focused, but I've tried to draw out some sort of other examples as well. And I should say I've got a cold as well, so I'm hoping my voice will hold out for my 10 minutes. The Scottish Government's Community and Renewable Energy Scheme is delivered by Local Energy Scotland, and Local Energy Scotland is a consortium of 3 Scottish charities and the Energy Saving Trust. And our mission is to support communities to engage with, participate in, and benefit from the energy transition to net zero emissions. And the energy transition is going to be huge. It is going to be such a huge transition, and ensuring that it's just and fair and involves people is really important. It's also important to recognise that different communities are going to want to engage in that transition in different ways. So we need to provide different support for different communities, and we need to make sure that our support is accessible to a really wide range of diverse communities as well. In terms of our support, it is very much a funding package. We have our development officers who handhold and support communities right the way through the process, really from that very initial inquiry right the way through to project completion. We try and share all the information on our learnings on our website. We have toolkit, resources, training, we run events. So that kind of resource, that sort of support package runs across the whole of a project. Any new project, we need to provide some development support initially into it. And a lot of that's through technical advice, and we do that through framework contractors. And the reason we do it like that is rather than you have to apply for a grant, appoint a contractor, run the scheme, we just provide a contractor to you, and Locogen actually do a lot of the work through that framework. And it means that you can very quickly establish the viability of your project and move it forward if that's necessary, but also close it quickly if that's not the right way forward. We also provide grants for project management, legal advice and financial support, but most of the support is via our framework. If you've got a viable project, we can then move into capital funding. For small projects, that might actually be for construction, but for larger projects, that's often for planning costs, feasibility study, more detailed feasibility studies, grid connection, radar studies, and all the things you'll need to develop a successful project. It's important to say that the focus of this is successful projects, and government funding is very tight at the moment, so we really have to focus on those projects with the best chance of success to move forward. I've got a few different examples of some community energy projects we've been involved in, and I want to talk a little bit about the sort of support package we put in place around them. And starting on the left-hand side, we've got the Isle of Egg at the top, and Knoydart at the bottom. Knoydart's a peninsula, and both these communities are off the electricity grid, and they're off the electricity grid because they're so remote they can't feasibly be connected to them. So the communities there own and operate their electricity systems, and literally keep the lights on in those communities and those communities thriving. The support we've provided to those projects is around capital funding to be able to develop their network and to take it towards net zero, but also a lot of work around due diligence on contracts and making sure they're all robust and proper, and just acting as a critical friend on the design systems. But those communities bring such incredible expertise. There's some real learnings from them in terms of developing energy systems. And in the middle, the two pictures in the middle are the kind of community electricity generation projects. And there's communities across the UK who have developed or are developing their own renewable energy generation projects, with all surplus being invested back into community priorities. And that's what really differentiates community energy. The picture at the top is of a very recently taken foundation just before the concrete was poured in for Radio City's subsidy-free 2.5 megawatt wind turbine. So it's really nice to see these projects still going, because it was very difficult for a long period of time as the feed-in tariff closed, and it is still challenging. But this project's in Kilburney in North Ayrshire. In terms of the support we provided for this, the community had a really clear mission. They knew what they wanted to do and why they wanted to do it. Really talented community with a really diverse range of skills within it. But taking that idea through to something that was investable is really expensive. So the role we had in it was to underwrite that development risk, getting it through planning, radar, dealing with all the different processes that Layla will talk about more, and all the way through. And once that project was de-risked, they could attract capital funding into it. They got some loans through Thrive and Social Investment Scotland and paid us back, and they're going to build that project out and own and operate it. So a really nice example of a project that's still happening. We also support community buildings. We're really keen that these buildings that provide great services in local communities are affordable to run and also clean, and people visiting them can experience low carbon technologies. So this is one of those where we have a specific funding call for, and communities, village halls, faith buildings, community owned leisure facilities can apply for funding up to £80,000 to decarbonise their community buildings. Very briefly, that top one is on Iskon Eco Farm. It's a Hare Krishna group, and they do lots of things on that farm, but one of the things they do is they grow and cook food and deliver it for free to people in need in their local area. So often having the energy project allows communities to deliver their mission. I want to talk a little bit about partnerships, and this is rather than the community developing the project on their own, we're working more on shared ownership, where a commercial, often wind farm developer will develop a large-scale project, allowing the local community to invest in and take a share of that wind farm. The example here is Cross Dykes, which was developed by Muirhall Energy. and it saw the local community there investing and buying 5% of that project. So they bought a small piece of a larger project. It worked out about the same sort of megawatts as the Radio City project. And it allowed them to benefit from the economies of scale that a commercial developer brings and the expertise and the skills that that developer brings, but to own a share in that project. And the support we provided for that was the kind of community development and capacity skills development, but also lots of financial and legal advice to make sure it's the right investment opportunity for that community and to go through that due diligence. We also have, I'm not going to talk about this much, but in addition to shared ownership, commercial developers pay community benefit, and it's around 26 million a year in Scotland at the moment, and that will continue to rise. It might be a really good source of funding for community energy projects. Finally, I want to focus on these kind of local partnerships, and the idea of this is rather than developing a project to sell energy to the electricity grid directly, you sell it to a user directly. So in this example, we have Glasgow Community Energy, who have developed rooftop solar. So they fundraised for it, developed it, and built it on the local authority, Glasgow City Council's roofs, and they sell the energy to them at a lower cost. So it's really a win-win for the council, and it means the community's raising capital and developing the project, and the council gets cheap low carbon electricity from it as well. So I've talked a little bit about Scotland and some of the support in Scotland, but just to flag that there is the Community Energy Fund, which is available via the Net Zero hubs in England. In Wales, there's a Welsh Government Energy Service. So in Scotland, England and Wales, there is support available to help communities to develop projects. Also on funding at a UK level, there's the Energy Redress Fund, which is open to charities and community energy groups. And this includes a carbon reduction and innovation fund within it. It's not open at the moment, but will be soon. And might be a really good source of funding to help develop the projects. And I suppose anyone interested in community energy, I'd encourage you to join the membership organisation. That's Community Energy England, Community Energy Scotland, or Community Energy Wales. And finally, I've just put our contact details on as well. We have a whole host of information available. On our website, you can register to our newsletter, and often we announce funding early in the new year, so it means you can be up to date with that. So kind of follow us and register for that. But apart from that, thank you for this. I'm really looking forward to the discussions as the questions progress later. So thank you, Layla.
You're very welcome. Just waiting for control. Chris, you might need to click through a slide.
I think
No,
that's you now.
have I got it? There we go. Okay, so whether you come to Locogen with a firm idea in mind of what you want to develop, or an empty site and the ambition to just do something, our first action is always a constraints analysis. If you know that, for example, you want to develop a solar PV farm, this constraints analysis forms the backbone of your feasibility study, looking at how technically, environmentally, and financially feasible your project could be. If you're not sure what you want to do, this analysis is the first step in our options appraisal process, and that's designed to narrow down that list of possibilities, resulting in a shortlist or the most feasible single option for a project at your site. So our constraints analysis process uses GIS mapping, which is the images that I've shown there, to identify things on or around your site that may present opportunities or threats to a project. This is a long list of things, but that can include environmental or ecological designations such as SSSIs or Ramsar sites, archaeological or cultural heritage designations such as listed buildings, scheduled ancient monuments, military low-flying zones, military or commercial radars, agricultural land classes, nearby roads, railways, commercial and residential properties, and proposed, consented and operational wind, solar and battery storage projects nearby. This analysis then helps us narrow down the areas of your site that are suitable for development, such as identifying parts of a site where a wind turbine could be positioned at a suitable distance from nearby housing while avoiding impacting military radar coverage, or to identify the most suitable technology for installation on your site, where, for example, a military low-flying zone might rule out wind development, but a poor agricultural land class would support a solar PV farm. What I've shown here is a site that we were looking at. Works really well for solar PV, but there's those weird sort of diagonal and wiggly lines running all the way through it. That is footpaths that were on the site that we could not build over. So we've just designed the site around it. Planning consent is typically a contentious issue when it comes to renewable energy development. It represents a significant hurdle in achieving project success. However, this constraints analysis is designed to vastly reduce that size and scale of the hurdle at a very early stage of project conception. So once a suitable technology and or scale of development has been identified, we move to assessing financial feasibility. We know that developing renewable energy comes with a massive price tag, and recent history has shown that one of the largest financial hurdles of a new development is the price of a grid connection. As such, we always recommend engaging with your DNO very early on. Online generation maps are available for most DNOs, which show the nearest substations to your site, as per the image on the left there, and give an estimate of what available spare capacity there is on that substation for new generation, but you'll only really understand likely costs if you submit a budget cost estimate to your DNO. While you can do that yourself, we at Locogen have significant experience in compiling that information required and can act on your behalf to do that if you're willing to issue a letter of authority to the DNO. We would then typically follow up any budget estimates received with a surgery call with the DNO to discuss potential alternatives that may be available, or to understand what the impact on that quote would be if we were to increase or decrease the size of the development. What I've shown there in that table is one site. It's the purple dot on the image. It's sat on a sort of boundary between three different DNOs. So we got three different quotes back at different scales of development. You can see there we've got quotes that vary from 80,000 for a grid connection up to 21.6 million. It really is just working with the DNO to find that scale of development that best fits your project. So once we have estimated costs for grid connection from the DNO, we can use balance of plant costs obtained from our recently completed and or ongoing projects, such as typical costs for roads, foundations, energy generating equipment, transformers, etc., to calculate estimated capital loads for the project, as well as ongoing operational and maintenance costs. We would also use an estimated energy yield or an estimate of the electricity that your site would generate and compare those against different operational models to not only determine what the financial feasibility and payback time of your project is likely to be, but also to determine what the best course of action for the sale of the electricity that you generate should be. As in, should that be sold directly to the grid? Should it be sold to a local off-taker via a private wire arrangement? Or should there be a power purchase agreement in place? If financial feasibility isn't reached at this point, it's often worthwhile revisiting that with a different scale or type of development. For example, a 10 megawatt solar PV farm might not be financially viable due to the cost of grid connection, but a 5 megawatt solar PV farm may have a much lower grid connection cost, i.e. not just half of the 10 megawatt, but significantly lower, and therefore represents a better development option. What I've put on this slide is something that we found in a recent project that was really, really interesting. We compared the cost of installing a brand new 1 megawatt turbine on site versus a refurbished 2 megawatt turbine. And you can see in the red table that the brand new 1 megawatt represents a fairly poor payback period, very low rate of return, and actually net present value after 20 years is still negative. We replaced that, we changed nothing else. There was a different grid connection cost associated. There was higher capex costs because it's a bigger turbine, but we replaced it with a larger turbine, a refurbished model. And you can see at the end of that 20-year period that you've got, you know, a net present value of over 1.5 million. It's unlikely that that site would last for 25 years with it being a refurbished turbine, but that actually, the larger turbine represented the much better development option there. So hopefully now at this stage you have a technically and financially feasible project. It's well positioned, away from any significant constraints. It represents a great return on investment and a really positive opportunity for your community. At this point, we pass the project on to two different teams, either our wind or solar team or energy storage team, depending on your project, and our consenting team who deals specifically with planning works. Our wind and solar team are better placed to define your project, so they identify the most suitable turbines or PV panels to be used and optimize that site layout. Once that site layout's been agreed, the team then use much more detailed resource such as wind speeds from nearby operational wind farm sites or solar irradiance levels from satellites to produce an energy yield assessment. How much electricity is your project going to make? These revised figures are then fed back into that financial model to better predict future financial performance. A finalized site layout and turbine or panel selection can then also be used to go back to your DNO to obtain a formal quote for grid connection, for which Locogen can also supply all of the necessary supporting information such as schematics and single line diagrams. At the same time, our consenting team would begin tackling your planning hurdles, so undertaking screening or scoping exercises with your local planning authority to determine the scale of the planning application you would need to submit. And that may be, does it need a full EIA? Is it just an environmental survey? And they would identify any further issues from a planning policy perspective, such as proposals that would directly contradict local plans or any published renewable energy planning guidance. Once that screening and scoping response has been received, planning works begin in earnest. Locogen has an in-house team of former planning officers, ecologists, cultural heritage and archaeological specialists, and it all means that we're well placed to predict and circumnavigate any potential planning hurdles before they represent a significant threat to the project. And once planning consent and a grid offer has been secured, we can hand you back a neatly wrapped project that's ready for construction, obviously pending you raising a significant amount of money and appointing contractors, but we can help with that as well. Construction costs money, but Ripple Energy came up with a really innovative way to raise the funds for their wind farms, so I'm going to pass you over to Simon now to explain more.
Thank you very much, Leila. I will see, do I have control?
That's you.
Thank you very much.
No, Simon.
So I'm Simon Peltenberg. I'm Chief Projects Officer for Ripple Energy, and as Leila says, we have a slightly different approach. Our mission is to enable everyone, everywhere, to generate their own clean and affordable energy. I am trying to, there we go, click screen, and there we have some people. How do we do this? Well, we do it by micro ownership. Householders own little bits of large-scale renewables and have their share of the power allocated to them. In this way, no matter where you live, if you live in a flat or if you rent or if you want to move, you can generate your own clean power. We give access to large-scale renewable energy projects in just the same way as an institutional investor would be looking for. So how do we do this? Well, unlike the scenarios where Chris and Leila described, where there's an existing community that then develops a project, what we do is we identify existing projects that have already been consented. We work with the developer to take the project through due diligence in the transaction, and we then form the cooperative society to raise the money, the equity, to purchase the project and then build it out. So we're kind of project first, then community. We build up a community from like-minded people from all across the country that want to work together to co-own a large-scale renewable energy asset. We then have once project starts to generate, there are power purchase agreements with the various suppliers. So the supplier buys the power from the project. It pays back to the generator, the wind farm or solar park, enough to cover the operating costs, and the rest of the value is paid to the members of the society according to how much of the project that they own. In this way, individual householders can be generating their own clean power and get a saving on their bills. A lot of people sort of imagine that all of these different agreements that we need to have in place would be quite complicated. I would note that the power purchase agreements, the rules of the cooperative society, share purchase agreements for the project itself are all quite standard agreements. It's just that we've put them all together in a rather novel way. So here you can see an illustration of that savings element. So it's as power price goes up, wholesale price goes up, your bills go up, yeah, because you're having to pay for the wholesale power that you consume. So power prices go up, your bills go up. With the Ripple model, if power prices go up, your bills go up, but so too do your savings. Yep, and that way it creates a stabilization effect on your bills. So we demonstrated this really well with our first pilot project, Greg Vatha. There, when we launched the share offer, it was in the middle of the pandemic and power prices were very low. And so in the first year, people got a small amount of savings on their bills. Then energy prices went way up and people got bigger savings on their bills. So stabilization effect. Yeah. Here's a bit of detail, more detail about the different elements that we do. So greener, cheaper, and professionaler is what we do. I think where we talk about greener than a green tariff, a lot of green tariffs out there have been what's called REGO backed. So the supplier buys certificates to equate to the volumes of power that they're selling via their green tariffs. The issue that we have with that is if everybody in Britain went onto a green tariff tomorrow, it would make no difference to the amount of green power that's being generated. Likewise, if nobody was on a green tariff, it would still be the same amount of green power being generated. With our model, we're building new projects that people are buying into. There's new green power going onto the grid as a result of the co-op members' actions. They're putting their money in and they are generating new power. I think as well, in terms of cheap and easy, our platform is all online. It's incredibly accessible and it's really quick. I mean, it takes like 3 minutes if you really race through the sign-up process, and then you're a member of the co-op, you paid your money, we'll then go out and build the wind farm for you. And when it comes through to the partnerships that we might have with the developers that we buy the projects from and the supply partners, the likes of Octopus, it's a real differentiator in the market. For suppliers, they are looking to see how they can support their customers on the green energy transition. And there's nothing more engaging for a consumer than turning them into a generator, I would say. So like I say, what have we done to date? Well, Greg Vatha was brilliant. Our pilot project went 900 people in the co-op society there. We went up to Kirkhill, where there's 5,600, and then Derrillwater, almost 9,000 members of that co-op. I would say that the Derrillwater cooperative society share raise was £20 million. That is by far the biggest single co-op share raise in British history. I'm pretty sure we've got the number 2 spot as well with Kirkhill at 13.5 million. We've very much redefined what one can do with a cooperative society. If anyone thinks they know of a single co-op share raise that's bigger, then please do let me know, because I do say that quite often, that we're the biggest. I think as well, the note that I've made is that we take on consented projects. We try to de-risk the projects as much as we can. We're not doing new technologies. We're not interested in putting excessive risks onto the co-op members. We are representing the projects as best we can, and we do all the heavy lifting through that due diligence and then managing the construction phase as well. What we've done on all of our projects, actually, both wind farms there, as well as co-investors. So the co-op is one shareholder of the SPV, that's a special purpose vehicle that owns the asset, and then there's other parties that also own alongside. Everything's proportional, so if the co-op owns 50% of the project, it gets allocated 50% of power, and the other shareholder might get allocated its 50% of the power. By crowding in co-investors, it gives us access to bigger projects, economies of scale, better value for everybody involved. So there we go. So there were some of those are the big funding headlines. So not just the co-op share raises, but in addition to the co-investors input as well. And I would say again, because we effectively cast our net nationwide for the co-op members, that gives us the ability to raise very significant amounts of money. On an individual basis, we tend to find people invest about £2,000 on a project, but it's from as little as £25. As I say, it's all proportional. So if you only own £25 worth of a project, you get allocated a small amount of power. About £2,000, you're probably, I mean, all projects are different, but we tend to find people invest that much because they would expect that size of share of the project to generate about 3 megawatt hours a year, being the equivalent of an average household's consumption. We do make it very easy for people to do it all. As I say, all online, and we've got our platform and a dashboard so people can see very dynamically what their project's doing. We've even got, I should have shown it, there's a little image of the turbine down at Greigvatha spinning in real time that people like to see. But here's an illustration of a comparison of the generation day to day from the turbine versus consumption day to day. You don't need to obviously consume at the same time as you generate, but we do find people use our APIs and the rest of it to create their own dashboards to see how it's correlating with their own solar generation stuff at home. Because the way of our model has been put together, we describe it as B2C, business to customer. So we've got quite a large marketing and technology team to generate these platforms and to really help engage with the co-op members on an ongoing basis, and especially as we get into the marketing phase for our share offers. So there's high impact marketing. There's a picture of a bus stop in Marchmont. It's looking a bit drab that day, but do not underestimate just how much effort and how much cost is involved in doing a nationwide marketing campaign. Radio, and we've even done TV adverts in the past, but finding your way through things like Advertising Standards Agency, or is it Authority, Facebook rules, social media and stuff, it's incredible. When you see the stuff that goes out on Facebook, you think and you can say any old thing, but when you try and advertise there and use the word climate, oh, they come down on you really hard. It's very, very difficult. And so we have a lot of in-house expertise as to how to navigate the way through that. But as a result, we get huge numbers of people involved in what we're doing, and we get great feedback as well. We have our dedicated in-house customer service team. We have a chat function on the website. We're very, I'd say, very proactive in how we deal with inquiries from potential customers and our existing members. So what we have is on our website is a forum page, and what we find is the co-op members will share their ideas, not just about the projects themselves, but about what else they're doing, and giving each other advice as to how everybody else can then leverage their Ripple ownership to take more action on climate change. It's great when you suddenly, the penny drops that, oh, I'm generating my own clean power, that's stabilizing my bills for the future. Well, now if I buy an electric vehicle, my electric vehicle can be powered by my wind farm, and I'm guaranteed some stable savings or price on that basis. We're very proud of what we've been doing, and we get lots of awards for it. So we're very pleased, and we love meeting new people that have heard of us as well. It's amazing. Sometimes we'll go off to conferences in mainland Europe, and people come up and say, "Oh yeah, hi, yeah, I love what you're doing. It's a bit like that company called Ripple." Yeah, that's us. So word is spreading, and yeah, sky's the limit. We're working very actively on our 4th project now, which we hope to be launching in the not too distant future, which we have announced as Big Wind. So there we go. Thank you very much. Back to you, Leila.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in today and listening. We hope that has inspired you to make a start on that community energy project you've been thinking about for the last 10 years, or has given you some people in the industry to get in contact with if you think that we can help you in any way. I see that some questions have come in. If people want to ask more questions, please just do write them in the questions box, and we'll answer them now. I'll let Derek manage the sort of panel, and we'll answer
Okay.
as we can.
Yeah, if you have got any questions, then obviously we've covered an awful lot this morning. So if you've got some questions, please stick it in the question box. If you know who you want to answer the question, you can direct it at that person. Otherwise, we'll try our best to direct it appropriately. Let's see. This question here for Ripple, I think it's for Simon, and it's how can you manage the electricity production fluctuation? As it continues electricity? I think that's about managing fluctuations in generation.
I get it. So quite often people will say, what happens if the wind's not blowing and I'm being, on a Ripple project? The important thing to remember with our model is that you consume electricity at home, you get supplied by your supplier. You pay for what you consume. If you leave all the lights on, your bill will be high. The saving you get on your bill is determined by how much power your share of the wind farm or solar park generates and the value of that power. So what you see at the end of each month is this is your bill cost, and then you get a saving applied to your bill. So there's no need for sort of self-balancing, albeit some highly engaged people try to do that, I know, but there's no financial or practical requirement to do so. In time, we can foresee that should we see people are self-balancing, then there may be an argument that we could lobby for lower balancing costs, but that would be something for the future.
Okay, smashing. Another question, how keen are commercial lenders to finance projects using refurbished turbines? So I guess that was an example that Leila used about the differences in finances that can be achieved using refurbished turbines. So the question is, how keen are lenders on doing that, and how keen are insurers to insure such projects?
So the market right now, the number of sort of small scale turbines for onshore, so we're talking sub 1 megawatt or sub 2 megawatt, there is very few turbines available. EWT do turbines up to 1 megawatt in size, but above that you're really running out of options, and your only option largely is refurbished turbines. It is well known now that is the case. Turbine manufacturers want to install the big 7 megawatt offshore wind turbines, not small scale single 2 megawatt turbines. So it is known, lenders are aware, lenders are willing to lend for those projects. Obviously a fully refurbished turbine produced by Vestas or someone like that is fully warranted, fully guaranteed, everything like that. So yes, lenders will lend and insurers will insure.
Excellent. One from Johanna, do you ever know of a possible project and go out and find community interest? So I guess that question is maybe Chris, it's do you ever become aware of a possibility of a project and then do it the other way around, find a community to get involved in that project?
A little bit, and I wish we had more resources to do it directly. One of the things we have done is, for example, where we've seen things like Scottish water resources that could potentially have a renewable site developed adjacent to it and supply it. We've gone directly to communities to try and develop them. Also, we know there's a lot of commercial scale wind farms being developed and the opportunities for shared ownership. We'll try and do more awareness raising in those communities, more events, trying to raise sort of skills capacity awareness of what it is, how to go about it, and what's available. So we do where we can, but it'd be something we'd love to do more of.
Excellent. One for Simon. It's from Mike. Simon, at what stage could Ripple take on a project? So I guess that's at what stage in the development would Ripple get involved?
So to date, it's always been post-consent. We are in conversation with a number of developers to be involved at an earlier stage. Clearly, for a developer, it may be advantageous should they wish to offer shared ownership. They can say, look, traditional models of shared ownership have needed to set up a community body, but it may be that in some communities people might like the idea of just being able to buy in as individuals via a Ripple co-op. So that's something that we are very open to, and even taking on operational projects. I know it kind of goes contrary to the idea that you're building a new project and putting new green electrons on to the grid, but we have done polls of Ripple Co-op members to say, well, look, would you prefer to buy into a project that is then built on your behalf, or would you like to buy into a project that's already operational and then see a return on your investment almost immediately? The responses were very much 50-50 on that latter question there. So we're open to everything. I think when it comes to energy and consumer engagement, diversity is absolutely key. There's no one size fits all. So the more variety that is out there, the more likely it is you're going to get a wider demographic engaging.
And another one for you, Simon. It's how are Ripple defining consumption needs? Is this total gas and electric? What about an allowance for moving to electric heating or adding an EV? I guess that's a question around how many shares are allocated against a person's consumption.
Yeah, I have an inkling that the person's looked at our website to ask that question. So as I said, there's the minimum is £25. So if you just want to buy a little bit of a project, fine, you'll get a small amount of power being generated allocated to you. We do set a bit of an upper limit. We suggest to people that they don't buy more shares than would be expected to generate the equivalent of 120% of their consumption. And that's because if somebody's living in a one-bed flat and they buy £10,000 worth of shares in a co-op, they're clearly not doing that to just generate their own green power. They're doing that as an investment. When we registered our cooperative societies with the FCA, they were very keen that they not be used as an investment product. So that's why we set that limit there. The limit is set on the basis of your electricity consumption. And if somebody was to get in touch with us and say, well, look, I am buying an electric vehicle, my consumption I expect will go up by this much, or I'm installing an air source heat pump, etc. We can be pragmatic there and say, okay, we think that is entirely reasonable for you to have a larger estimate of your consumption and hence warrant a larger purchase into the cooperative society to generate more power for yourself.
Excellent. Pretty straightforward one for you, I think, Chris. Do CARES provide funding for wind and solar projects? From Tim.
Yes, we do, but we don't have a specific fund for it. We just deal with it on a kind of project inquiry basis, but we've got a number of solar and wind projects under development as well. So yeah, you just give us details about your project and we'll be in touch and look at what the right package of support is.
Excellent. One for Leila. Most communities do not own land. How can this be overcome? Is a good one.
So what we see with a lot of communities is that they will lease land from farmers, and that farmer may become part of the community group or become part of the cooperative that ends up installing something, and therefore takes a very, very small amount of rent for the land, £1 a year or something like that. Or potentially the community group builds a project on their land, sells that power back to the landowner if they're a big dairy farm or something like that, and then again they pay a small amount of rent for the land. But yeah, that's typically what we see, is that a local landowner will offer up some land for development if that's what they are interested in. It's important to note, if you develop solar, that doesn't mean that you can't graze sheep on the land. If you develop wind, the landscape is largely unchanged with the exception of a sort of large concrete hard standing and a turbine in the middle of the field. You're not losing huge amounts of ground space. So it's not an unattractive offer for local landowners, local farmers, things like that.
Excellent. This may also be for you, Leila. What are the rough payback periods and suggested investment amount to see the savings reflected in the slides on average?
I think that might be for Simon in relation to the investment in the cooperative.
My apologies, Simon.
I'm just trying to scroll to the the question there. Oh, payback periods. Yeah, it very much depends on what happens with the wholesale market. When we launched the Greg Vather share offer, we were suggesting that a central case scenario might be a 14-year payback period. It's looking a lot more like it will be about 4 years, because in the space of 1 year, people made about 30% of their initial investment back. You know, that's not going to happen every time, clearly, but as I say, it does very much depend on what happens with the wholesale market. I would say 12 to 14 years would be our typical payback periods. In terms of investment amounts to see the investment savings reflected in the slides on average, as I say, all of those were done on an average, so about £2,000 is the typical across all the projects.
Excellent. And another one for you, Simon. What other utility partners do you have, or is it just Octopus?
It's Octopus so far. We have announced that E.ON Next are due to come on board fairly shortly, and then there are others as well in the pipelines. So we expect that in the not too distant future, we will have a panel of supply partners that may well make up the majority of supply across the UK.
Excellent. And Chris, will Local Energy Scotland support our community council trying to negotiate with wind operators to initiate a local energy discount scheme?
We don't support direct negotiation. What we encourage developers to do is to speak to the local community and develop a community action plan to understand the priorities of the community in that area, rather than necessarily say you will do a local electricity discount scheme. We have got a case study on local electricity discount schemes on our website, so you can find out a bit more information about it. But it is the relationship between the local community and the developer which sort of sets the parameters for the Community Benefit Fund.
Excellent. Back to you, Simon. Here's an optimistic one. Does the Ripple model ever get to the stage that my investment payback exceeds my energy bill?
That is a strong potential.
Excellent.
If you were to go away for a month and use no electricity at home, and it had been a really windy month, then it is quite possible that the savings could exceed the bill, in which case it would just be there as a credit on your account, as is often the way when you build up credit in the summer months and you wear it down through the winter months. The important thing, though, that I would note is if you consume a megawatt hour at home and you generate a megawatt hour with your Ripple project, it doesn't mean your bill will be zero. You might recall when I was doing my stabilization hand gesture there, your bill is higher than the savings because the savings is determined by the wholesale price, whereas your bill is determined by the wholesale price plus grid costs, taxes, and levies. So even if you generate at wholesale price, you might get, say, £50 if that's the wholesale price of power, but you consume electricity at, say, £130 a megawatt hour.
Excellent. this is from, I think, a community group. We Catch Lochleven are aiming for a district heating scheme of 3,500 properties with a variety of energy sources. Would Ripple be interested in this sort of project?
Ooh, I missed a little bit at the bottom asking if Ripple would be interested in the project. No, sorry, let me read through that again. So, I see a district heating scheme. It's not
I think
something
I
that
think we
we've
can
considered
convince
to
Simon to
date.
take on district heating. Come on, Simon. You've done wind, you've
Well,
done solar. District heating's the next logical step.
we have all these attendees who heard Simon say yes.
Yeah.
We when we started out at Ripple, somebody gave us wise advice and said, as a startup, you don't starve, you drown. So we do try to stick to what is successful, albeit we are innovative. At this time, district heating is not on the horizon for us. But I don't know if Chris might be able to direct the questioner somewhere else.
Yeah, we have got some thought. Do some initial feasibility on district heating sites in terms of understanding their kind of feasibility. So I'll share some details about that. I didn't have time to cover that, but that might be a good option to start that, exploring the potential on that site.
Back to you, Simon. With Ripple, is the customer tied to one electricity supplier, or can they switch and retain the savings?
So the customers can switch. They would need to switch to another supply partner for the project, though. So you need to switch to a supplier that's got a power purchase agreement with the project and has agreed to pass through the value to you, the customer, using the Ripple model. There's another point that we often, almost related point that we often get asked, and people say, well, what if I was to move away? Well, how can I get, am I just going to lose all my value there? With Ripple, we make the shares withdrawable but not transferable. And we'll usually have a straight line digression of the value of the shares. So say for the Craig Vather turbine, we assumed 25-year life. So we said, well, let's reduce the value of the shares or withdraw 5% of the shares each year. So it's a straight line digression over 20 years. That meant that if you were to withdraw your shares after, say, 5 years, you would have 75% of the original share value back. The difference between that and transferring is if you were to be able to transfer your shares, you could say to your neighbor, say, yeah, I bought these £1,000 of shares with this Ripple co-op, but I think they're worth £2,000 now. Do you want to buy them? That would be a form of speculation, which again, the FCA was reluctant to support. So hence withdrawable, not transferable.
I see. Now, locally, we have the ex-Longannet power station site available. The community have already provided their view of future use, mostly renewable energy projects. How do we go about getting this off the ground as the demolition work nears an end? That might be Chris.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, and one we should definitely follow up, because I imagine it's got a lot of the kind of ingredients to have a really successful renewable energy project there. So I think, reach out to me and we'll look at what sort of support can be put in place.
Okay, Doc. On the Ripple model, Simon, what happens if you downsize your house and need less electricity?
We don't ask that people withdraw their shares in that circumstance.
Right.
So long as people have bought their shares originally on the basis that they want to generate their own clean power, then that is a reasonable approach. And if in due course they are generating more than they consume, well, they're just oversizing their green impact personally. So there we go.
Okay. Next question. In Edinburgh, we have Harlaw Hydro. Other places must have rivers which historically have power generation. Do you have community examples? So, Leila, I know that Locogen has worked in a few.
Yep.
And I'm sure,
Yep.
Chris, you must know of a few.
So we've got Ben Moore. If you go on our website, there is a very detailed case study on Ben Moore, which is a community-owned hydro scheme in Scotland. And we've recently been working on 2 community-owned hydro schemes in England, one at Nantwich and one at Congleton. So they are about. Hydro is just typically a slightly more difficult project, just because it's very site specific. It's incredibly site specific. Turbines are bespoke. The whole system, the whole dam, everything like that is all bespoke in each project. So it's just a lot more costly and tricky. And but yes, they do exist. They are out there.
Okay, you might be a good choice for this next question as well, Leila. Have you worked on projects that are funded by community share offers?
Yeah, we have. We work quite closely with 2 companies, one called Share Energy and one called Energy for All, and that is largely their way of raising funds for community projects. So yes, we have worked on projects that are funded by community share offers. It works well. Everyone likes to feel like they're buying into the project success.
Yeah, this may be for you also. Is there a minimum size of solar array needed to produce a reasonable payback time of, say, 8 to 10 years?
It depends largely on grid connection costs, planning, consent, everything like that. Sometimes that 8 to 10 years will be a 500 megawatt. Is that what I mean? 0.5 megawatt array. Sometimes that will be, a 5 megawatt array. It just depends on the amount of electricity it's going to generate. It depends on the cost of the site. It depends on grid. You need to run that analysis really to determine what that size would be for your site. But that's fairly straightforward to do if that's something that you want us to look at for you.
Okay, doke. And the last question, I think, are there any examples you could point to of community renewable heat projects? So I guess, Chris, you might know of some or not, and Leila.
There's a fair few which have been developed, but there's not many that have got over the line. The models that are out there are generally like, for example, Aberdeen Heat and Power, which is an offshoot of the local authority, which has developed the project. But we have worked on developing some community heat projects, but we haven't got them all the way over the line yet. And it is difficult to develop these projects, but we very much see them as the direction of travel. Leila, is there anything you'd add?
Yeah, so the famous one is Swaffham Prior, down in Cambridgeshire in England. We worked on one under the Rural Community Energy Fund in England at Greater Coxwell. The community group was called Greater Green Coxwell. They technically are feasible. Financially, in this current energy market, are very unfeasible. What we're looking at now, projects that seem to be coming in the door are ones that have looked at potentially whole village district heat networks where the village is off the gas grid and so they're all on oil. But they've realised that with the cost of oil as it is and the cost of electricity as it is and the huge discrepancy between them, that actually it's much cheaper to stay on oil, which is terrible, but sometimes money makes the world turn. And yeah, so we're looking at producing demonstrator projects within these villages to show that actually, if you combine solar panels with an air source heat pump or something like that, you end up with a system that is largely paying for itself at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the questions. I hope that was useful and I hope we didn't miss anybody out. So Leila, if you want to just wrap things up, I think we're just about on time, 11:58 according to my clock.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you very much everyone for attending. Our contact details should have been on this slide, but they're not. They may be on the next one. I'm not sure. Derek might need to skip forward. If you've got any questions, just drop us a message. I believe that this webinar will be made available after we end the recording. But yeah, please get in touch if there's anything you think we can help. Even if you contact me and I'll pass it on to Simon and Chris, I'm happy to do that.
We will send everybody the slides, as someone mentioned, and also we'll put it up on our YouTube channel, the recording of the webinar, so you get a second chance to have a look.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.